Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these quick and easy wire macrame bangles. So we're using a simple technique with just a square knot, but the trick is then to finish it off so it's all connected into one continuous piece and therefore creates a bangle. And I also think it's a great unisex piece. Now if you want to support me in any way, I do have a shop where I sell loads of jewelry kits and tutorials, so you can always check that out. And while you're there, feel free to sign up to my newsletter to make sure to not miss any future updates. And of course, always feel free to like, share and subscribe. And there's also a super thanks button below the video. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make these bangles, then keep watching. So these are the tools and materials that we need to use. The only wire that we need is a 0.8mm, and in this case I'm using a copper wire. Of course you can use whatever colour you want to. And you can also play around with the gauge using either a thicker or thinner wire depending on the look that you want. Now I'm going to be working on this mini macrame board here. It has these notches all the way around the edges, so it makes it nice and easy to do a macrame with. And because we're working with wire, we also just need a few tools. So I've got my flush cutters here so we can of course cut the wire. And then I got some tweezers and nose pliers to help manipulate the wire. So you can always check out the description box below the video for the material list and useful links. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. So we then need to cut some lengths of our wire. So first of all, I have a length here of about 45 centimeters, and this will be our holding wire. And then we need to cut another 2 lengths of our wire, and these are about 1.5 meters each, and they will be our working wires. So first of all, we want to get our wires attached to the macrame board. So I have that ready here, and then I'm taking the short length of wire, so that's the holding wire. And I just want to place this on the short sides so we get the long side of it to work on, and just place it in the middle there, also roughly in the middle of the wire. And then just bring the wire towards the back and then bend the ends here around the back so it's then fastened in place. Then we need to grab the 2 long lengths of wire, and we also need to attach these. Now I'm just going to put them into the top slot, but the same one where the other wire is attached, and you just want to leave a bit of a tail on them, so just about 20 centimeters or so. And again, we just want to bend these around the back of the board, and we then have our working wires in place, and we can just separate them out. So we now have our holding wire in the middle and a working wire on each side. So what makes this nice and easy to make is that we're only going to be using a square knot for the bracelet itself. Now if you're not familiar with square knots, I will leave a link in the description box down below to a beginner video so you can learn macrame knots. But if you are, we can just start from one side here, bring our wire. In this case I'm starting with the left one over towards the right and lay it over the holding wire. And then take the right length here, get to the end, and then bring that over the length we just brought over, underneath everything in the middle, so that means also the holding wire, and then bring it up through the loop on the other side here, that's created by the first wire we brought over, and then pull this through, nice and gentle, and then you can see we kind of get this little pretzel shape, and it's trapping the holding wire in the middle of the knot, and then just pull our length nice and tight. And of course it's going to be loose now because this is the first knot, but we then need to make the other half of this first square knot. So I'm going to start with the opposite side. So take the right one over the holding wire, the left one goes over that, underneath everything in the middle, and up through the loop here on the other side, and then just pull it through nice and gentle. And again we'll get that pretzel shape, trapping the holding wire in place, and then just pull this nice and tight to sit right up underneath the first knot that we pulled tight. And now this is a full square knot. So what we need to do now is basically repeat this. So I started with my left wire before, so I'm going to do that again. Now it doesn't matter if you start on the left or right side when you start a new square knot, just make sure that you stay consistent. So you could also start with the right side and then do the left to make your square knot, but just make sure you then continue to do that. So again, repeat the square knot that I just showed you, bring the left wire over, the right one goes over that and underneath everything in the middle, up through the loop on the other side to then be pulled tight. So we'll get a pretzel shape, and then just pull our wires nice and tight together, just as tight as you can get them, and try and keep your tension consistent throughout. Now what I also like to do is, because this is wire that we're working with, it's going to be reacting differently than if it was cord or something. So if you can see here, with the warmth of my hands and fingers, it's going to get misshapen here and there. So every time I tighten a knot, I like to then run the wire through my hands and fingers like that. That warms up the wire and makes it easier to then make the next knot, but also it smooths it back out. So we want to make sure we kind of smooth it out before we actually then start making the next knot. So start from the opposite side, bring that over, and then bring the other side over that, underneath everything in the middle and up through the loop. And then just pull that nice and tight. And then we just want to keep going like this. A little tip I also want to give you is if you need to take a break while you're doing this and then you come back and then pick it back up, but then you kind of forget what side you need to start with to make the next knot. An easy way to figure that out is if you look at the very last knot that you made, you're going to find on one side the working wire comes out underneath a little loop, and on the other side it comes out over the top of a loop. So on this side here where it's underneath the loop, it's more towards the back, and on the other side where it comes over, it's more towards the front. So what that means is you need to then start with the side where the wire is coming out underneath the loop, so more towards the back. So if you look at that last knot, that's then a way to tell what side you need to start with to make the next knot, in case you forgot and it kind of gets a little confusing. So that's just a little tip if you ever lose track of what wire you need to take next. So now I made the whole row of macrame. You can see I have the whole length there. And then what we need to do is start taking this off the board, because we still need to do a bit more macrame, but we just kind of have to reposition everything, and we need to kind of do this not on the board. Also, just a little bit about the length here. Now what I do is not make the full length that I need, because like I said, we're going to make a few extra knots. That's going to add a bit more to the length, and of course you can make it whatever size you need it to be to fit you, but the average size for a female bangle is 7 to 7.5 inches. So that is just for reference. Otherwise, what we're going to do is start to put this together so it can turn into the bangle. So we need to first of all shape this. So you can easily shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel or anything you have handy. Or you can just use your hands and fingers, and it doesn't have to be perfectly shaped straight away, because we can always go in and reshape it at the end, especially because it's probably going to get a little bit misshapen once we just continue to work with it here. And then what we're going to do is have the ends meet up closer together here, and the two ends are the holding wires, so those are the ones that are coming right towards each other there. So not the ones going out to the side, they were the working wires, but we take the holding wires and basically cross them and have them lie right next to each other, and then just hold on to them the best you can and make sure we have a bit of the ends sticking out past the knots there. So now we then need to make some knots to start fastening this in place. So I'm just going to start on one side, doesn't matter which one, but then remember what I told you earlier to find out which length of wire you need to start with, because we want to make sure we continue the macrame look so it blends in nicely. We need to take the length of working wire that's coming out below the loop, so just going towards the back a bit. So I'm going to start with that side, bring that over, and now I'm bringing it over both of the holding wires there. You just keep hold of everything, and then the other one goes over that, underneath everything in the middle, which is actually through the bracelet there, and then up through that loop on the other side. And then we just need to start pulling this tighter. So the first knot here is always the kind of fiddliest one, because nothing's fastened in place. But after this it will get easier. So just continue to pull the two working wires tight to sit all the way up right underneath the last knot that was there before. And then we have the end of the holding wire from the other end of the macrame piece coming through that and kind of getting fastened in place. Now of course you can still pull through, so be careful not to do that. So just make sure we have a bit of a tail coming through there. But then to finish off that square knot we've just started, start with the other side and then make the other half of the knot and then pull that tight, and just make sure the two holding wires there are staying flat next to each other. Pull that tight, and now what I just like to do is make a few knots here while we're on this side anyway. You could also swap to the other side and just make a knot or two there just to kind of fasten it in place and maybe make it a bit easier to work with. But just make a few knots here on this side in the same way that I just showed you. Again, making sure that this end doesn't pull through like mine almost just did. And then pull that nice and tight. And then I've just made 3 knots there. Then I'm going to flip it around, and we need to do the same on the other end. So again, just pull the length through however you need it, just so we make sure we have enough through so it's not going to pull out. And here again, just make sure we find the right wire to start with. So that's, in my case here, the right one. Bring that over. The other one goes over that, through the bracelet, and then up through the loop on the other side, and then tighten it. You can see we're just making another square knot here, just like I did on the other end. And then make the other half of it, and then that also now traps this end of the holding wire in place, and it's all now a lot easier to work with as well because we don't have as many loose wires flying around. But then I'm just going to make another 2 knots here, so I end up with 3 after we've connected it together like I did on the other end. So now we have the knots on both sides done, and then what I'm going to do is take the 2 holding wires and we just want to start pulling these together. So we pull the knots there close together so there's no gap, and the knots that we just made in the middle here are also what you can use to adjust the size if you want to. So once you pull them together like this, you can then tell what size it's going to be, and if you end up finding out that you actually want it larger, you can always pull it apart a bit again and just make a few extra knots and then pull it back together, and then you have the new size that you want. So that is also why once you're making the full length of knots there in the beginning, we don't need to make the full length of the bracelet we want, because one, we need to add a few more knots here to connect it together, but also you can always use this area to adjust the length with anyway. But then from here, all that's left to do really is finish off these ends. So we're just going to do a few at a time. I'm going to start with the working wires. So these are coming out from the last knots that we made, and you'll find that on one knot here, the one length is coming more towards one side and the other length is coming more towards the other side, so kind of in towards the middle. So we're going to stick with that, and then in this case I'm just taking the one that's coming more towards the outside here, and I'm going to take that and bring it over the top of the knot straight towards the other side. And then as for the other one, I'm just going to flip it so I'm then looking at the inside of the bracelet, because this one is coming more towards the inside. This I'm going to then just pull through to come towards the other side here, and then again bring it over the top of the knot and just push it down to sit flush against the knot. And then I'm just going to do the same with the other ones. So we're just taking one length at a time and bringing it towards the other side and staying on the side where that wire is more naturally coming towards, and just making sure to push it flush against the knot. Now we want to go in and start cutting off the excess. So what I'm going to do is take my flush cutters and just one wire at a time, we want to cut off the excess, but just making sure there's going to be a little tail left where it's wrapping around from one side to the other there, because then we can take our tweezer nose and just go in and push that down and just basically tuck it in between the other wires so it gets hidden inside of the knot. And we can just do the same with the other ones. So cut off the length and then just make sure to push it down within the knot, and just the same with the inside ones. Cut them off and then push them into the knot, and then just run your fingers over the area to make sure there's no wire you can feel that's going to catch or scratch on anything, because obviously we don't want that to be the case while we're wearing it. But then what we have left are the 2 holding wires here. So first of all, we can just pull them tight just to make sure we don't have a gap or anything there, and they are coming out towards the front. So you're also going to then be able to see that because we laid the 2 wires next to each other, in my case here, this one is towards the right of the 2 holding wires. So that means I'm going to take the end of it, gently bend it back down, and then you're going to look right where this wire is coming out from. Within that knot, you can see the other length of holding wire, and what I want to do is take the end of this and bring it down through the same knot, but on the other side of that holding wire towards the back, and then just pull it all the way through so it gets nice and tight and basically wraps around that holding wire but within the knot, because we obviously want to get rid of these lengths, but we also need to make sure it's going to stay nice and secure. And then on the back here, we can just have it come out in the direction that it's naturally going. Make sure it's nice and flat against the knot. Grab your pliers and then we just cut it off in the same principle as before. Make sure to leave a short tail that we can then push down with our pliers and tuck away inside of the knot. And again, just make sure you can't feel it with your fingers. And then you just want to do the same with this other one here. So again, within the knot where it's coming out from, take the end, go down through that knot, but on the other side of the holding wire, and pull it all the way through so it wraps around that holding wire, and then come straight out to the side that's naturally coming towards, making sure it's flat against the knot. You can then cut off the excess and then flatten down the end and hide it inside of the knot. So we have now finished off all the ends of the wire while still making it nice and seamless with the rest of the macrame here. So it's literally a bangle you can just take on and off over your hand. And of course, if you find that this has gotten a little bit misshapen while we've been finishing it off, you can just reshape it with your hands and fingers or put it back around whatever you shaped it with in the first place. But otherwise, that's then your finished bangle ready to wear. So I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this wire macrame bangle, and they're pretty quick and easy to make, and I also think make for a great unisex bracelet. Now if you want to check out more of my wire macrame tutorials or tutorials within loads of other mediums, feel free to check out my channel, and you can always like, share and subscribe. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.